Well, I don't consider the American Psychological Association to be an authority on very many things, but I do think that the organization's website provides a simple yet accurate definition of trauma. It says that trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event and mentions as examples accidents, natural disasters, and rape. So if your house was hit with a tornado while you were huddled in your basement with your children, or if you were involved in a high-speed collision on the highway and you nearly died, or if, God forbid, you were sexually abused in the past, then there's a good chance that the experience will have a psychological and emotional impact that will stay with you for a very long time, or possibly forever. And the APA says that a traumatized person will typically experience shock and then denial in the short term, and long term they may find that their relationships become strained. They may have flashbacks, trouble sleeping, migraines, insomnia. All of these are symptoms of experiencing that trauma. It's very real. You can go through things in life that will have this kind of effect. But the good news is that for most of us, these sorts of events will be rare. Life is difficult because we are conscious agents living in a fallen world full of pain and suffering. And there's a certain amount of existential anxiety that comes with that and is always at least bubbling under the surface of our everyday life. But everyday discomfort is not traumatic, or at least it shouldn't be. Which means that if you find yourself frequently describing your everyday experiences as traumatic, and if you can do an assessment and see that things other people cope with relatively easily are somehow sources of trauma for you, then that's a good indication that you are the problem. If you're constantly talking about your trauma and finding new things to be traumatized by, that means either that you're being whiny and hysterical because you want attention, or you really do feel traumatized by everything, which means that you are emotionally fragile to an extreme degree. Either way, the problem is you. And that sets us up for this story published on Friday by Rolling Stone. They tweeted the story with this caption: exclusive. Current and former staffers tell Rolling Stone that the Kelly Clarkson Show is toxic behind the scenes. They say Clarkson is fantastic, but allege that they are underpaid, verbally abused, traumatized, and put in uncomfortable positions. Yes, we have yet another tale of a hostile work environment, a story of trauma and emotional abuse and other things like that. It was only a couple of weeks ago that we heard about the alleged hostile work environment over on the now defunct Tucker Carlson Show on Fox News. In the past, we've heard tales of hostile work environments on shows like Ellen DeGeneres and Dr. Phil and others. Now, this could be a sign that people working in television are slaves suffering horrific abuses. It could mean that being a 27-year-old PA for Kelly Clarkson is more grueling and taxing than being a 14-year-old in the coal mines in 1873. It could mean that. Or it could mean that the media business is fast-paced and high-pressure and results-oriented, and it attracts a lot of young adults. And this is a bad combination because many young adults these days are too weak and too timid and too incompetent to keep up in that kind of environment. So it could go either way. Let's investigate and find out. Reading from Rolling Stone, it says, quote, when the Kelly Clarkson Show debuted on NBC in the fall of 2019, the talk show immediately became a beloved, fresh addition to the traditional daytime lineup, with a built-in fan base from Kelly Clarkson's singing career who have been rooting for her since she first won the American Idol competition in 2002. The show captivates audiences. Over the past 4 seasons, the pop singer has interviewed guests like Hillary Clinton and Dolly Parton. She's performed karaoke segments where she sings covers of other people's popular songs like Whitney Houston's Queen of the Night and Adele's Rolling in the Deep, and has maintained a level of candor and relatability with viewers at home. But behind the scenes, employees say they were overworked, underpaid, and that working at the show was traumatizing to their mental health. A former employee adds, quote, I remember going up to the roof of the stage to cry and being like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Why am I putting myself through this? Wow, I mean, what was she put through? I say she because I'm assuming this is a woman, though unfortunately that may not even be a safe assumption anymore. But what happened? What would cause a grown adult to take time out of her day while she's still on the clock to cry like a baby? Do they keep her in chains in the basement and force her to do her job while, against her will, while her manager comes by with a whip and beats anyone who isn't keeping up? Is working the Kelly Clarkson Show kind of like being a galley slave on a Roman ship in the first century? Is that how bad it is? Well, we'll have to keep reading and find out. Former employees say the toxic behavior behind the scenes starts with executive producer Alex Duda, who shields Clarkson from what staffers say they're enduring because of the climate Duda created. I think Alex Duda is a monster, a former employee says. I have a friend who's an executive producer who warned me about taking this job because apparently she has done this on every show she's worked on. As for Clarkson, the current employees, as well as 10 former employees, are under the impression she isn't aware of how bad things are for lower-level staffers, some of whom say they've taken on other jobs as babysitters, dog walkers, and Uber Eats drivers to pay their bills. Now, notice how we've made it several paragraphs into this epic tale of woe, and we've yet to hear any specific examples of trauma being inflicted on the staff. The only specific detail we get so far is that low-level staffers have to take on second jobs. My God, the humanity. You mean to tell me that when you're just starting out in an industry and you're a low-level employee, you might not make a lot of money and so you have to do other things to pay the bills? How terrible. I mean, that's only been the experience of literally millions of people since jobs have existed. I had to do the same thing when I was in my early 20s. I've worked 2 jobs at various points. I've worked 3 jobs. I've had times when I worked multiple jobs and one of the jobs was an overnight shift. So imagine getting off of work at like 10:30 p.m. and instead of going home to go to bed, you have to start a whole new job at midnight. Well, many of you can imagine something like that because you've done something similar. It's not unusual. It's not harrowing. It's certainly not traumatic. It's just work, and you'll be fine. You've seen the CEO of Innovation Refunds and GetRefunds.com on TV explaining how they've helped so many small businesses with their ERC tax refunds. They've completed thousands of returns for different kinds of businesses. Innovation Refunds has hundreds of 5-star Trustpilot and Google reviews and is certified with the Better Business Bureau. In around 8 minutes, you can easily start the process on GetRefunds.com, and you could be on your way to receiving up to $26,000 per employee. The ERC tax credit is a refund of your already paid taxes. It's not a loan. It's designed to let the business owners direct the refund money into anything the business needs to grow. That's money that you can use to improve your business however you see fit. But you got to go to GetRefunds.com to start the process. There's no upfront charge. They don't get paid unless you get paid. Innovation Refunds has already helped clients claim over $5 billion in payroll tax refunds through the ERC, and they may be able to help your business also. Go to GetRefunds.com or download the app from the App Store today. That's GetRefunds.com today. We know when you're out there looking for a job, one of the hardest things to do is to figure out how to stand out, and stand out in a positive way, too, because you can stand out in ways that would not be so great. Standing out can be tough, especially when you're looking for a job or when you're hiring, looking to find that application that really stands out. And that's why you need to check out ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter helps you find the most qualified people for your roles fast. Right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/Walsh. ZipRecruiter's matching technology helps you find the most qualified candidates for a wide range of roles. See a candidate you like, you can easily send them a personal invite so they're more likely to apply. Their user-friendly dashboard makes it easy to filter, review, and rate your candidates all from one place. Let ZipRecruiter help you find the best people for all of your roles. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. You could be one of them. You can see for yourself. Go to ZipRecruiter.com/Walsh to try ZipRecruiter for free. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/WALSH. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. So where is the real trauma here? Well, let's keep reading. One former employee says that they recently quit working at the show because a producer who reports to Duda yelled and cursed at them multiple times on stage. They say they developed so much anxiety from the way they were treated at work that they would regularly vomit and exhibit physical signs of sickness. This job deteriorated my mental health, they say. The second former employee says that they took a leave of absence because their mental health was also suffering. They say they were bullied and intimidated by producers who went out of their way to make staffers feel scared to ask questions and get their work done. According to the staffer, this prompted them to take a month away from the job and see a psychiatrist for the first time in their life because they truly couldn't handle it mentally. The former staffers say they've worked in the entertainment industry for years on different sets, but the Kelly Clarkson Show is by far the worst experience I've ever had in my entire life. It deterred me from wanting to work in daytime ever again, they say. When I say I was traumatized, I was really traumatized. Oh, you were really traumatized, were you? Really, really traumatized. When other people talk about traumas they've suffered in life, they're referring to things like watching a parent die of cancer, watching a friend get blown up on the battlefield. And you know, those are traumatic experiences. You feel comfortable using that same language to describe your experience of getting yelled at by your boss. There's no reason to keep reading, by the way. This is it. This is the one single scandalous detail we're given. Some people yell sometimes. Traumatic. You know, I once had a boss years ago in a meeting cuss me out at the top of his lungs and throw a book across the room in a fit of rage. I wasn't traumatized. I didn't lay awake that night trembling with tears in my eyes. I never sought therapy to help me recover or cope. I think later on I told one of my coworkers about it and we laughed because the guy's a psycho. And I think that's the last time I ever brought it up to anyone until this very moment. Now, should your boss scream and use foul language in the workplace? No. Is it inappropriate? Yes. Should it be a crisis in your life and a source of deep emotional trauma? Should you be crying and vomiting because of it? No, absolutely not. People lose their tempers sometimes. It happens. It'll happen at work. If you're working with other human beings like yourself, if you're working in a high-pressure, competitive business like media, it's even more certain to happen. Tempers, emotions run high sometimes. You don't need to alert the media about it. We already know, and we don't care. At the beginning, I said that we can interpret all this whining over insignificant things as either disingenuous and performative or a sincere expression of extreme emotional fragility. But I think the second option is the more concerning one. And unfortunately, I think also the correct one. We have bred a generation of Americans to collapse under the slightest pressure, to recoil in horror at any amount of discomfort and difficulty. And at the root of this disease is their belief that they have the right to a life free from discomfort and difficulty. They haven't been raised to understand that hardship is an absolutely inseparable part of life, of the human experience. They truly believe that a life of total ease and luxury is available, is possible, and anything that interferes with that pursuit of this fantasy is therefore a violation of their human rights. People in the past didn't complain nearly as much about their toil and suffering, even though they experienced both to an infinitely greater degree than we do, because they recognized that this is the price of admission for conscious beings in a physical world. That's why even if you've suffered actual trauma, real trauma from a truly traumatic experience, it's still not a good idea to harp over it the way these people harp over every stubbed toe and paper cut. You know, one of my favorite scenes and one of my favorite stories ever put to screen, the Western miniseries Lonesome Dove, happens right after Diane Lane's character, a prostitute named Lori, is kidnapped and then terribly abused by an outlaw named Blue Duck. Robert Duvall's character, Gus, kind of this grizzled old Western guy, rescues her, and later that night, when they're sitting together, Lori breaks down in tears and says, they shouldn't have done that to me, Gus. They shouldn't have taken me. And Gus gives her a hug and pats her shoulder and says, I know, honey, but they did. I know they shouldn't have, but they did. They did. Dumb modern audiences may watch that scene and interpret it as Gus being uncaring or dismissive, but it was the opposite. His point was that you won't gain anything by dwelling on the fact that your past sufferings shouldn't have happened. Yes, it shouldn't have happened, but it did happen. And the point Gus was making is that you'll never be able to function in the world and truly heal unless you accept reality for what it is. It shouldn't have happened, but it did. Now what? If Gus would say that to a woman who'd just been kidnapped by outlaws in the Old West, what would he say to a grown woman crying on the roof at work because her boss was kind of mean to her? She shouldn't have yelled at me for being 7 minutes late to our production meeting, Gus. She shouldn't have done that. Maybe if he was in a kind mood, he would pat her softly on the shoulder and deliver the same message. I know, honey. She shouldn't have, but she did. But if he did that, he'd probably end up getting fired and then sued for sexual harassment because he touched her shoulder and called her honey. I think the better response in the latter case would be something like, yes, honey, she yelled at you. People yell sometimes. That's life. What did you expect? Did you expect that nobody would ever lose their temper at you, ever in your life? Even when you're doing annoying things like showing up late to a meeting that everybody else managed to get there on time for? So you want everyone else to exercise total and perfect emotional restraint, but you're the one up here on the roof crying like a toddler in the middle of the workday? At least the mean people are productive. You're useless. Look at you. Now get back to work or you're fired. That's what I would say anyway, which probably is why I'm not in management. That'll do it for us today. Have a great day, everyone. Talk to you tomorrow. Godspeed.